Whereas secondary adjustments let you isolate and work on specific parts of an image. Primary adjustments let you work on the entire image, whereas secondary adjustments let you isolate and work on specific parts of an image. So for example, you might want to change the colour of a car from blue to red without affecting the rest of the shot. Or you might want to add warmth and saturation to an actor's skin, or create a vignette to help focus the viewer's attention in a specific area of the scene. So we're going to start by looking at qualifiers. The qualifier palette allows you to select a colour from a shot with the intention of grading it separately from the rest of the footage. This palette also includes several ways to select that colour using hue, luminance and saturation. This detailed level of control enables you to get a clean isolation or key of objects even when other elements in the shot are of a similar colour. So if it's not already open, then we're going to go back into the same project we were working in, the Gnarly in Pink project. And we're going to go to thumbnail 12 now. If we just play through this shot. Now, for this shot, you're going to create a much requested stylized image in which one colour will be preserved while the rest of the image is black and white. You've seen many movies with this effect and maybe even tried creating it in other applications. The critical task is being able to cleanly isolate the colour that you want to keep. So in the central palettes, we're going to choose our qualifier icon. In this clip, we are going to preserve the pink helmets. When the qualifier palette is selected, hovering your mouse pointer over the viewer will display our little eyedropper, and we're going to use that to select the colour. So we're going to click the back of the middle girl's helmet. Now, the eyedropper is not only used with the qualifier palette. It will affect whichever palette you have open at the bottom of the colour page. If custom curves are open when you click on your image, then control points are added to the curve, which we saw with our hue versus sat in the previous lesson. So now I've clicked on the back of her head, I have loaded the pixel that I clicked on into the qualifier at the bottom. Now if I click the Add Colour Range button, which is located in the selection range of the palette over here, I can start to add additional colours to my selection. To help me see what I have and haven't got selected, I'm going to turn on the highlight mode by clicking the little magic wand symbol at the top of the viewer. You can see at the moment I've only got a very narrow selection of colour. To add to the colour range, I'm going to click a few more times around the helmet to pick up a few extra pixel values. So when the range is fully selected, you can fine-tune your selection by adjusting the hue, saturation and luminance values in the qualifier palette below. The qualifier controls are very sophisticated and powerful. It can take some time to master them as you figure out how different shots react to different parameters. The best way to learn is just by starting to make some changes. So we're going to start by adjusting the hue width control. So hue at the top here, I'm going to just hot scrub, so click and scrub through the width column here and add additional hues to my range. As I increase that, you can see more and more of the picture is being selected. I don't want all of those colours down there, so let's shrink that back down again. You can also adjust the low and high values under the saturation and luminance. So my luminance, I can see I'm getting these dark areas, which I don't want. So if I bring my low up, I can start to get rid of those dark areas. It can be helpful as you experiment to turn some of the sliders on and off by clicking the red dot to the left of the name. Doing so allows you to check if that change would improve the selection or not, or how much difference each of these three things is actually making to your selection. So if I turn on and off hue, it obviously makes a huge difference. Saturation, actually only a minor difference, and luminance is making a big difference as well. Now, once I'm happy broadly with my hue, saturation and luminance qualifying selection, I can then refine that matte using the Matte Finesse tools over on the right-hand side. This technique does not rely on the colour selection as much as it manipulates the selection that you have already made. So to help me, I'm just going to go into a slightly different view mode. I'm going to go into the little black and white view mode, which is represented by this symbol here. and that will bring on a slightly more traditional black and white alpha or matte view, which is similar to the one that we saw when we were working in the Fusion page. If I adjust the matte finesse controls at the bottom here, I want to make sure that there's as little of the black or greys as possible. So we can use the denoise just to get rid of some of these noisy areas. That softens it a fair amount. I can clean up the black. I can clean up the white. I can also change the in and out, so how much is in the selection. And I can also add a little sort of blur or feathering to the selection as well. The goal when adjusting the matte finesse controls is to produce a clean black and white image. Grey areas are seen primarily in transparent areas, of which there are none in this particular shot. So we should have a pretty good black and white key come the end. Let's do a little more denoising. Let's just flick back into our color mode. I'm actually going to just bring up the low a little bit more. There we go. That gets rid of some of these low saturated objects. And that works pretty well. If I click on the second page of Matte Finesse Tools, I can set the mode to grow rather than shrink. Because the clean black and clean white parameters that I adjusted in here in number 1 initially may have shrunk the matte around the helmets a bit too much, I can use the grow parameter to allow me to increase the size of the matte. Once I fiddle with that, I should be ready to actually start color correcting this particular shot. I'm going to increase the radius to about 4, and I'm going to turn off the highlight view. Looks pretty good. And in the adjustments strip below the color wheels, I'm going to locate my hue value, and I'm just going to use that to shift the pink color in the viewer to another color. Let's say blue. Let's turn my highlight mode off. That can be a good way of just checking how much bleeding into your selection is, and you can actually see I'm pulling in quite a few other pixels, so I'm actually just going to refine this a little more. Let's increase my width a bit more. Now that'll kind of do, that's not too bad. I'm going to double click the hue control just to get that back to the standard colour. Now occasionally you will want to focus your attention on the area that is the exact opposite of your selection. So for example in this shot you might be happy to leave the helmets pink and then manipulate everything that isn't pink. With the pink selection already made, doing so will be easy, because we can tell it to add what's known as an outside node and use the qualifying key from this node to create an inverted version of the original node after it. So what I can do to do that is simply press Option O, or right click on the node and choose Add Node Outside, or I can also do that through the color page, Nodes, and Add Outside Node. An outside node then, if I turn on my highlight mode, you can see it's done the exact inverse of what I had done in the previous node. It's inverted the matte. So that second node is now present in the node graph. And as with previous nodes that you've created, it will share a connection with the preceding node via that little green RGB input-output control there. However, if you look closely, you can also see that there's a little blue connection. And that's new, we've not seen that yet. Those blue triangles are the key portion of the image. So that's the alpha that's being sent from the qualifier tool in the first node across to the outside node, where the outside node essentially inverts it. So with node 2 selected, in the adjustment control strip, we're going to drag the saturation field all the way down to 0 to desaturate everything else. Now, it's a little bit of a silly thing, we're only sort of messing around, but you get the idea. We have exactly what we set out to achieve. The key is a little bit dodgy. We have this part of our arm missing and that part of our arm's in, but we can obviously refine that as we do a more concerted effort to get a better key as we work through. Right now, though, I think you understand the processes. This is a way of isolating a colour and then either working with it, or in this case, using an outside node to invert it and work on everything but the colour that we selected. So the ability to reuse key data is a beneficial component of node-based workflows. It speeds up the grading process by requiring you to perform only a single key and require less computer processing power than, say, a layer-based system as well. Now let's look at combining qualifiers and power windows. Like qualifiers, power windows allow you to specify which area of the image you want to alter. Now, unlike using a qualifier, power windows do not rely on a selection of hues, but rather a spline shape within the frame that identifies what you want to mask out. You can refine an area of the frame you want to modify even more precisely by using these two tools together. Often an image will have several instances of a hue that you are trying to manipulate. Instead of focusing your efforts on cleaning up the selection in the qualifier palette and then likely compromising the quality of the key, sometimes the best option is to use a power window to further indicate which part of the frame you want to actually focus your attention. So what we can do in this case is, if we go to clip 7, we're going to change the colour of the pink box on the floor to more better match the kind of purples and blue hues that we have in the rest of the shot. So with node 1 selected, we're going to hit Option S to add a new serial node. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come back to our selection range and take off our add selection. If that's still selected from before, you will click and nothing will happen, which actually happens a lot and trips you up quite a bit. So just make sure that you go back to your standard initial selection range tool, and then we can click on the box. Again, if we use the highlight mode here, the keyboard shortcut for which is Shift H, then we can easily see the selection that we've made against a grey background. So we're going to use the center here just to find a better starting place, and then the width to increase that selection. We can further adjust the saturation and luminance in the main section of the palette, and then we can use our matte finesse tools again. However you do it, we're trying to make sure that we end up with as much of this selected and as little of everything else. So I can bring down my low here and my high. Let's just check. I don't think luminance is actually going to be doing a huge amount. No. We've got almost all of it there. Let's come back in here. Let's clean up our blacks and our whites. Let's denoise it a little bit. Actually, it seems to be pretty good. It's quite hard to get rid of these extra bits at the top, but what we can do is we can combine this key with a power window in order to isolate the selection to just the area around the box. So back down here in the palettes, we're going to go to our power window, and in the list of power windows, we're going to click the curve button. The curve button is indicated by this little pen, and that will allow us to do a freeform window. Now it can get quite confusing if you have a lot of these masks, so we're going to name this one by double clicking just to the right of it. I'm going to type in box. If I move my cursor up into the viewer, and just zoom in a little bit, I'm going to draw just a simple shape around the box. And as soon as I close that shape, you can see it's now only applying the key, the qualification that it's doing inside that power window. Let's turn highlight mode off. And below the color wheels in the adjustment control strip, I'm going to drag the hue control again as a good way to just quickly check and see how good this adjustment is. And actually, it's working much better than before. And I'm going to bring it round so it's a bit more similar to the other colors that are in the rest of the shot. Let's maybe go for this sort of slightly more rich purple. That looks quite good. So combining the qualifier with a power window has allowed me to quickly make a clean selection based on the hue of the element, while just as quickly excluding the interfering elements from the selection. So using both tools meant that you didn't have to draw an overly precise power window around the box in the first place. Combining those two tools has saved a lot of time, and it's resulted in the cleanest key that I could achieve. Now let's go back to shot 12 and let's talk a little bit more about tracking. In the first part of this lesson, we intended to keep one helmet pink but turn the rest of the image black and white. But we didn't really do that because the shirts and the trousers and the other helmets are all pink too. Now that we know more about secondary colour correction techniques and power windows, we can track the helmet of the girl in the centre with a power window to isolate it. So we're going to single click node 1 to activate that node. And in the toolbar, let's go down to our window selection again, and we're just going to click to add a circular window to add it to that node. So we're isolating the key that we made in node 1. Let's rename this helmet so we keep track of it as we go. And in the viewer, let's drag the center around the helmet that we're trying to control. And let's drag the feather in a little bit so it's not too feathered. Try and get it as closely to being the helmet as possible. Actually, one thing that I'm going to do to help myself is in the view menu. I'm just going to go to window outline, and I'm going to tell it to do the window outline only in the user interface. So what that will do is it will remove it from my reference monitor, so I can control the power window here, but I can see in my reference window what that actually looks like without the window. That's because actually sometimes the power windows can get in their own way and it's hard to see the edges and where they line up. So this makes it easier for me to line that up with the helmet on my reference monitor. Now let's zoom this back out. And let's go down to our tracker, and let's just track forwards. And the track's worked quite well. We need to refine the size and shape of it, but basically understanding how to use these tools, such as the qualifiers and the power windows, and the tracker as well, it enables you to perform secondary colour grading with substantial control over the final look of your image. However, it is only when you combine these tools that their true potential is basically unlocked. So learning them and learning them well is the key to successful secondary colour grading.